Welcome back to Face the Nation. I'm John Dickerson. Former Texas Governor Rick Perry joins us from the campaign trail in New Hampshire. Welcome, Governor. I want to start by just saying, why are you going to do better this time than you did 4 years ago?
I would suggest that's the case. We're healthy and well prepared. So spend a lot of time in Iowa and New Hampshire, South Carolina. That pays great dividends just in itself.
When I've listened to your speeches and your announcement speech, it seemed like you were saying the governors have a certain set of skills and senators need not even apply for this presidential job. Is that what you mean?
Well, I think anybody can apply, but I think the facts are that governors do have that executive experience, particularly someone with 14 years of that executive experience. That no one gave me a handbook that said, here's how you handle Katrina and Rita and the hurricanes. Nobody said, here's how you handle Ebola, here's how you handle a crisis on your border. That only comes with that executive experience, and that's what I'm asking Americans to take a look at. Here's how we've run the 12th largest economy in the world. Here's the results we've had: 1.5 million jobs created from 2007 through 2014. Don't you think those policies, that focus on economics, is what we need at the White House at this particular point in time? And obviously the preparation on foreign policy that I've done and dealing with those issues is also, I think, a selling point that Americans are going to look at and say, that executive experience does matter, and it matters a lot.
What the senators would say is, yes, executive experience, you learn to make decisions, but if you don't understand the issues in your bones the way they think they do, you can be given option A and option B, and sure, you can make a choice between the two, but you don't even know option C exists.
Well, I disagree with that analysis, obviously. We took a chance on a young, inexperienced United States Senator back in 2008, and both economically and foreign policy-wise, I think most observers would say that we find ourselves in a rather pickle, if you will, economically and foreign policy. Our allies don't even know whether they can trust America or not, because the lack of experience that this president and his inability to connect the dots. And so I think executive experience, you know, it's really interesting to me that this business that we find ourselves in the political side and governing, the only place that you would discount experience, when you get on an airliner going to Chicago to London, you want the most experienced pilot sitting in the front left seat. I think that should be the same for the next leader of the United States.
On the campaign trail, you talk about how you've been hitting the books since the last presidential race. What's the most important thing you've learned in all of your studies?
Well, obviously, you've got to spend a lot of time with foreign policy, with people at the Hoover Institute, with the George Shultzes, with the Henry Kissingers, with the the Brian Hooks at the Hay Initiative folks, with Edelman and the Cohens. I mean, those are individuals with extraordinary, deep understanding of foreign policy. Sitting at the table with James Ricards and with Richard Fisher on monetary policy, two people at kind of opposite sides of some of these issues, but that's the type of preparation, that's the type of experience that you want to be able to tap into on these host of issues that you would face on whether it's monetary, domestic policy, foreign policy, and also keeping in mind, I think that you need to have a president who understands that all wisdom doesn't emanate out of Washington, D.C., that you got to trust these governors and trust these states to come up with the right concepts and the right ideas, and to frankly experiment out there in America, and that makes for great competition and a stronger country.
I want to ask you something about something, Governor, you said in your announcement. You said the American people see a rigged game where insiders get rich and the middle class pays the tab. Now, that's coming from you. We talked to Mayor Bill de Blasio of New York. Could have come from him. Could have come from Senator Warren of Massachusetts. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, as a boy who grew up on a dryland cotton farm, the child of a couple of tenant farmers, I grew up in a house that didn't even have running water. I relate to people who struggle and work hard to get ahead. And when we see these Wall Street bankers, when we look back at General Motors, getting sweet treatment, if you will. I believe in the bankruptcy laws in this country. There is nothing too big to fail from my perspective when it comes to banks or where it comes to big corporate entities. And I think Americans are fed up. I am. We're fed up by seeing Wall Street get treated specially, and you can't even get a loan from your community bank because of Dodd-Frank banking regulations. All of that has to change, John. I'm telling you, Americans are fed up with that type of inside where the rich get richer and the folks out on Main Street have to pay the bills.
What are you going to do about Wall Street then?
Well, regulate them. I mean, regulate them, make sure that that doesn't happen. If they make bad decisions, let them live with those bad decisions. Don't bail them out.
All right, but isn't that what Dodd-Frank is, regulations? Well, you were just saying that was bad.
Dodd-Frank is killing the community banks. Over-regulation in that sense. There needs to be some wisdom. My home state, one of the things that we were successful with was finding that balance between protecting the citizens and allowing the freedom for folks to grow, to be able to get loans, to be able to do the things that really matter. And Dodd-Frank just codifies into place these regulations. Big banks, and they hire all the lawyers, they hire all the accountants, and then they write it off and we pay for it. Community banks that are the real core of lending for small businessmen and women, for farmers in Iowa, you got to give them the freedom to loan to these people.
Governor, I want to get your reaction here. Hillary Clinton attacked you directly. Let's listen to what she said, and I want to get your reaction.
Here in Texas, former Governor Rick Perry signed a law that a federal court said was actually written with the purpose of discriminating against minority voters. He applauded when the Voting Rights Act was gutted and said the law's protections were outdated and unnecessary.
Governor, your reaction, but also Hillary Clinton's folks, and she says there really aren't a whole host of cases of voter fraud and that this is something you're just trumping up. Your reaction?
I think that the people of the state of Texas overwhelmingly support voter identification, and that's what this is really about. Hillary Clinton believes that all wisdom emanates out of Washington, D.C. She's the classic Washington insider, and she wants Washington to take this over. Listen, we've seen this with the Affordable Care Act. We've seen it with education policy. If you think that Washington needs to be controlling our voting and our oversight for voting, I just don't agree with that. And I think most Americans believe that the governors, the legislatures, and it overwhelmingly passed in the state of Texas. She's basically looking at the people of Texas and other states that have put these types of voter identification laws into place and saying, we don't trust you.
All right, Governor, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you, Governor Rick Perry of Texas. We'll be right back with...
This portion of Face the Nation is sponsored by Audi. Challenge all givens.
Joining us now to talk about all the news this week, the Washington Bureau Chief of USA Today, Susan Page. We want to welcome my Slate Magazine colleague, politics writer Jamel Bouie, to the broadcast, and my CBS News colleague, congressional correspondent Nancy Cordes. And last but absolutely not least is Ron Fournier. He's a senior political columnist and editorial director of the National Journal. Okay, Susan, I want to start with you. Rick Perry, he's hit the books. He's got the glasses. What are his chances in life?
So do you get a second chance to make a first impression? That's the issue for Rick Perry. I take him very seriously in this presidential field. I think it is a mistake to say because he had such a catastrophic experience last time around that we shouldn't that we should not take him seriously. And I think you saw the kind of confidence and manner, the kind of comfortable manner he has in the interview that you just did with him. Also a good fit with his party. You know, he's from Texas. That's part of the country where the Republican Party is strongest, and he does seem both more serious and a little more prepared, I think, this time around.
Ron, let me ask you then about Chris Christie, the other fellow we heard from today. What about him? What are his chances in the Republican
Well, first,
field?
congratulations. This kind of reminds me of what it must have been like to take the first fastball from Nolan Ryan. You might swing and miss, but you'll never forget it. Christie has always struck me as somebody who's really made for the times, at least his brand. A straight talker, tell hard truths, all the things he told you that he was going to be about. And I thought it was a kind of interview that might really appeal in New Hampshire. The problem is he's really muddled, really messed up, really maybe even destroyed that brand. Bridgegate, whether he was involved with it or not, he certainly failed the test of what kind of people you put around you and what kind of tone you set as a leader. And the budget problems in New Jersey and some of the other problems in New Jersey just don't reflect well on him as a potential president.
Although I have to say that one part of your interview really struck me, which is when you were asking him about Common Core. And it reminded me that there's a few things that he does better than just about anybody in this party. When he said, I haven't flip-flopped. I thought about Common Core, we tried it out for 4 years, and I changed my mind. It wasn't working. A lot of politicians, when you ask them a question like that, they try to argue that they never changed their mind in the first place, and it comes across as disingenuous. But, you know, on this issue and others that could really tie him up within his own party, he's willing to say, not that I made a mistake, but that, like everything in life, if it's not working and you thought it would, you try something else.
To make a flip-flop look like a matter of principle is very Clintonian.
Yeah.
I'll add that I think both of their big problems in this field is that the rest of the candidates are so good. If this were 4 years ago, I think Rick Perry today and Chris Christie today would be great candidates. But against Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio, Scott Walker, their problem is what do you have to offer that we don't already have in this field?
And that's new,
right?
And not. Nancy, I want to ask you about Rand Paul and where he ended up this week. He took on the Patriot Act, had a little victory, but in the end, what passed was not what he wanted. Give me a sense of Rand Paul at the end of this week.
Well, he raised a lot of money. His campaign won't even say how much he raised because they say that this fight was not about that. I think a lot of his Republican colleagues would beg to differ, but he did energize that slice of the electorate that is as passionate on this issue as he is. And when you've got a field that's as crowded as this one, 16 or so people, a devoted slice can take you a long way. On the other hand, he showed that when he's under pressure, he tends to say things that don't come across as extremely presidential.
I think he's got another problem, and the Patriot Act debate kind of highlighted, and that is developments in the world. You know, you had Chairman McCaul talk about it's actually, he thinks, perhaps a Chinese government hack of federal employment records here. We've seen the rise of ISIS and the terrible brutality of ISIS. I think that's that hurts Rand Paul's case that this is a time for the United States to be less engaged in the world.
Jamal, do you think that this issue of surveillance is gone away? I mean, what Rand Paul's banking on is that there's a whole bunch of people out in the country who really care about this. Has it come and gone as an issue? What's your sense of how its relevance going forward?
I think Paul's right about that. I think there is a large number of people who are very anxious about government surveillance. I think his problem is that in the context of a Republican primary, those people aren't so much there. There's some of them there, but if he wants to actually become the consensus candidate of the Republican Party, those are not the people that's going to take him there. And so he's sort of out of step with the kinds of people he needs to be in step with on this one issue, even if in a general election, I think it'd be a great play.
I agree with that, everything everybody's saying. When you just look at the horse race, let's give the guys some credit. This issue and judicial reform are two issues that he's not taking just right or left. They're really millennial issues. Both, this is a new era and we have to look at these issues in a new way and make up for the mistakes that we've made in the past and be honest about those mistakes. And they appeal to the rising voters in this country and the rising leaders in this country.
And to that point, I think Paul will end up being influential in the Republican field. I mean, in your interview with Christie's entire thing on reforming drug laws could have come from the mouth of Rand Paul. Right. And I don't think that's some weird coincidence.
I hope he influences the Democrats, too. They're, in my mind, on the wrong side of, especially Hillary Clinton, on the wrong side of NSA and surveillance.
Well, you've given me the nice segue. Thank you, Ron. To switch to Hillary Clinton, Susan Page, let me ask you. Hillary Clinton this week took a big swing at a bunch of her possible Republican opponents. What was behind that?
Well, one thing that's behind it is, I think, actual Democratic concern about all these voter laws aimed at what Republicans see as voter fraud that make very limited. They make just a little bit of difference. But if you had an election like we had in 2000, they could make the difference in a key state. So I think there is concern that these laws,
whether these laws are in place or not.
If these laws are in place, and we're seeing a big effort that Hillary Clinton basically unveiled this past week, to try to push back against these laws, fight them in the courts, fight them in the state legislatures. They're not an issue that's number one, I think, on voters' minds, but they do energize a certain segment of the Democratic Party. And these laws themselves could make a difference in a very close election.
And, she's been on defense ever since she got into this election, essentially fending off questions about her emails, about the foundation. This was a chance, and I'm sure her supporters thought it was about time for her to get on offense against her opponents who have been hitting her for months.
Again, this is an issue that's a rise above the horse race. These laws go back to 1845 when farmers had to be on their farms on Sunday to go to church and had to be in the market on Wednesday. A couple things have happened since then, like the telegraph and the internet. I mean, she's exactly right. These laws have got to be modernized and brought into the digital age. But is she a person who can get it done? Or is she going to be another politician who makes a lot of promises, create these wedge issues, and then when she gets in office, she divides rather than unites. She plays to her base rather than getting things done. That would be my worry. She's absolutely right. It's got to be done. But is she the leader who can get it done? I don't know yet.
Jamel, do you see any larger strategy here for Hillary Clinton in picking this issue? Ron makes the very correct point, which is we have a policy question here. Is it easier to vote, and should it be easier or harder? But there's also the political valence of what she's trying to do. What's your sense of the larger political strategy you see coming out of this?
I think she's trying to, I mean, obviously she's trying to reconstitute the Obama coalition, but I think she's trying to energize particular groups in that coalition that are absolutely vital to any win. If you look at Obama's margins in Ohio in 2012 and Virginia in 2012, those are margins that come entirely from African-American voting enthusiasm. If she can mobilize that, if she can show African-American voters that not only will she help their direct interests, but she respects them as citizens, so to put it, I think that can go a long way towards repeating that performance. And if she can get that kind of turnout among African Americans in those states, then that's almost the election for her. That is a win, and it's powerful.
Excuse me, you're exactly right, but that's my problem. She's using this to appeal to one small segment of the American public. This should be an issue that we all care about, whether you're living in Kentucky or Macomb County, Michigan. The fact that we're still playing under rules that are 2 centuries old is something that should really, a good leader would make it matter to somebody in Little Rock and somebody in Macomb County, somebody in Kentucky.
I don't think those things are mutually exclusive. And in the speech, she frames it explicitly as not, I'm doing this for you, this particular group of people, but this is the United States, we're a great democracy. It is wrong for Americans to be kept from the polls.
But what are we hearing out of her campaign?
We're hearing that.
But I think, this is the point in the campaign where everyone's playing to their base, right? And I think it's really...
But they got to be better than that.
Well, but who is at this point where they're trying to fire up their supporters, because we're in a situation in 2015 where you don't have as many people in the middle anymore that you can go to try to beat the other guy. You've got to get your supporters. It's the Obama path in 2008 and 2012. It's not the Bill Clinton path of the 1990s, and so it's clear that she's decided that that's the way to win.
But to Ron Fournier's point, if you want to stand out in a great big field, maybe being principled is a way to do it. And you actually saw a little bit of that, I think, in the Christie interview, which is he comes across as somebody who's not in Washington. I agree he's got problems, serious problems. He comes across as somebody who's not in Washington, somebody who'll tell you the truth. You ask him if you're going to get prosecuted in Colorado if you're smoking marijuana in a Christie administration. He said yes. That is kind of refreshing.
Yes, period, and I'll say it again.
I will say, though, that the Clinton path in 92 and 96 was good and aimed at the middle, but it also never scored a majority of voters. And even in 96, when Perot was less of a factor, Clinton only reached 49%. The Obama path may be tailored to a polarized electorate, but Barack Obama is the only Democrat since FDR to break 50% twice.
And Ron, what we're talking about here is an electorate that is different than we have seen before. Definitely. That really, it is all about, possibly, the way these campaigns are looking at it now, I appeal to my team, you appeal to your team, and this old idea of people in the middle who might be appealed to by rising above. Are there enough of them anymore to turn an election?
God, there's a majority of them.
But that vote.
But that's a problem. Why don't they vote? Is it because of the voting laws? Partly, but it's mainly because they have no reason to vote. They're not being inspired. They know nothing is getting done in this town. So the campaign, both parties are capitulating to the worst instincts. Let's do this thing called negative partisanship. It's really, that's now a policy of both parties. It's not about inspiring anybody. It's not about getting people to vote for me. It's about getting them to vote against the other side.
And another worst instinct.
We need a new kind of politics, not a Bill Clinton politics. You're exactly right. But certainly, but we have to do what Barack Obama promised to do in 2008 and actually follow through as a leader.
Another worst instinct is only caring about Hillary Clinton on the Democratic side. There are other Democratic candidates, Susan Page. Give me a sense of Lincoln Chafee joined in the race. What's your sense of the other members of the Democratic race?
If the metric system debate takes off, we're going to be perfectly situated. Not the candidate, not the challenger I would look to. I would look to Bernie Sanders, who I think has done surprisingly well. He's it's hard to imagine that he gets a nomination from Hillary Clinton, but he's getting big crowds in Iowa and New Hampshire. He is helping to shape this debate. He is causing some problems, I think, for Hillary Clinton in terms of looking authentic, because Bernie Sanders is nothing but authentic, and also in trying to decide where she positions herself in this Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party is moving to the left, especially on these economic issues. But if you're talking about a state like Virginia, those voters, if you're going to win Virginia, a lot of them are in the middle.
Ron Fournier, you talked to Martin O'Malley, another challenger. Where's he in his progress?
Yeah, I agree with Susan, but I went right off Martin O'Malley, because here's a guy who's got a relatively progressive record, and he can position himself authentically as a can-do, pragmatic, metrics-driven leader. So it'd be interesting to see. I don't think he can beat her, but I think he's really going to give her a tough fight. One thing I've heard is that both Martin O'Malley and Bernie Sanders' campaign plan to blow up the DNC debates, plan to blow up basically the Clinton-engineered debate system, and they're already talking to some of the liberal groups who like to have their own debates outside the system. And that could be interesting.
Interesting. All right. Thank you all very much for joining me on the first time out here. For all of you out there, stay with us. We'll be right back with more Face the Nation. It's been 1 week since Beau Biden, the son of Vice President Joe Biden and former Delaware Attorney General, died of brain cancer at the age of 46. Yesterday, 1,000 mourners, including friends, family, military leaders, and 2 presidents, turned out to honor him at a service in Wilmington, Delaware, at the St. Anthony of Padua Catholic Church. President Obama and Beau Biden's brother Hunter and sister Ashley celebrated the 46-year-old as a father, son, brother, and soldier.
Beau's was the hand everyone reached for in their time of need. Beau's was the hand that was reaching for yours before you even had to ask.
He was the constant anchor for me, my brothers, our father, and our mother. He was our protector, our mediator, the captain of our lives.
He did in 46 years what most of us couldn't do in 146. Here was a sign of an incredible family who brushed away the possibility of privilege for the harder, better reward of earning his own way. Here was a soldier who dodged glory and exuded true humility. A prosecutor who defended the defenseless. The rare politician who collected more fans than foes. And the rare public figure who prioritized his private life above all else.
Beau Biden left behind a wife, Hallie, and 2 children, Hunter and Natalie. Our thoughts and prayers for God's grace are with the Bidens. That's all the time we have today. Thank you for joining me on my first broadcast as moderator. Bob Schieffer had one piece of advice: stick to the news. That's what he did, and that's what we'll do, inviting people on to help us understand the news, and we'll try to ask the questions you want answered. And we'll hope to hear from you. Some of you may be on email, Facebook, and Twitter right now. Until next week, for Face the Nation, I'm John Dickerson.